Are you seriously going to eat, you fat blibbity blabbity blob?
I mean, then some of you might be like,
continual.
why would I want to start this?
Sensitive. She's sensitive.
You are listening to the Tammy Talks Unscripted Healing Podcast, where we share stories that are, you guessed it, unscripted.
That's the thing, this journey doesn't stop.
It doesn't really
right?
end. We have a general sense of the topic each episode, but really the whole point is just to show up and be authentic and let our inner child speak its truth. And I have continued to work through that story of constantly hearing, well, we don't got a hot dog on our hands. Yeah, guess what, Mr. Sabatsky, you do. So I'm so excited that you are here, and it is my hope that you hear yourself somewhere in the story so that way you can feel seen and heard as well. So let's start talking. Welcome to the Tammy Talks Unscripted Healing Podcast. I have such an incredible episode for all of you today. And I know what you're thinking. Tammy, you say that every week. Well, yeah, because every week is a bomb diggity episode. I just said bomb diggity. Don't worry. The episode is actually way better than this intro. Because I have such an incredible, inspiring guest, and I just got done recording with him. And sometimes it's fun to come back and do these intros because then you really get to feel the energy that I have coming off of that recording. And so I will jump to that episode here in just a sec. But first, I just wanted to thank everyone that tuned into my sauna buddy Mark's episode last week about his son Abe and just the love and support that people gave him, that gave that episode, and just sent all the love and healing to him and his family. So thank you so much for that and for supporting that episode. And really today's episode kind of goes right along with that as we are continuing to talk about mental health and getting support for those who need it. And my guest, Keith, is really the work that he's doing could have potentially helped someone like Abe. And so I didn't even think of that correlation until now. So, take that with you into this episode. Before I jump to the episode, I wanted to read a little snippet from their website, and I didn't want to mess this up, so I'm reading it because it's that important. In that, Mental Mountains Project is built on annual mountain climbing expeditions to create awareness, destigmatize the conversation on mental health, and raise funding. Our tag, Climb Your Mountain, is aimed to inspire those to take on the metaphorical or physical challenge that may seem insurmountable in their lives. Each year, we push further into the stars past our self-imposed limitations. And throughout his own journey with mental health, Keith has been able to find an outlet through the outdoors, being in the mountains. In an effort to bring the mountains closer to everyone, they've started an endurance mission to show up and do the daily work as well, in honor of everyone going through their struggles. So they have also founded Miles for Mental Health as a way to represent the daily struggle. And Keith talks all about both of these missions in the episode. And so please stay all the way till the end when he really dives into how you can support both of those missions, because it's such an important cause and we need to be able to help people have more access to getting the mental health care that they need. And that's really his whole mission. And so it's such a beautiful story. And also, this is going to go down as one of my biggest flubs. I thought about editing it out and I was like, no, Tammy, stay authentic and unscripted. And then I was talking about his inner child. And if those of you that remember Kevin from Tellurian's episode, and I helped him discover little Kev in that episode because he wasn't aware that he even had an inner child. And I was like, dude, you're totally connected. And he didn't even know it. Well, same thing happened here, except I called Keith's inner child little Kev and then caught myself and felt terrible. So I will forever apologize to little Keith. I'm going to call him little LK now. So wait for that one. I didn't edit it out, but yeah. Anyway, I know that little Keith is so incredibly proud of the journey that this man has been on. And I hope that you fall in love with his story as much as I did, and that you share it with someone in your life so that it can inspire anyone that needs this help. So I am going to do one little plug because it seems so fitting, is that I just got my battery for my heated vest. And I was like, oh, this is perfect episode, because once you hear the episode, you'll totally understand why I was on these mountain expeditions. I cannot say that word. Expedition. There we go. But anyway, I had bought this heated vest last year around this time, and I fell in love with this thing. As you know, anyone that knows me, I am always cold. I have heated hand warmers. I now have heated insoles, and this heated vest was like a game changer. Well, I don't know if I just maybe wore it out because I was wearing it in my apartment. It wasn't even outside. I was just wearing it around the apartment because I refused to turn my heat up too much. So, is that a childhood wound right there? Possibly. But anyway, I absolutely love it. And the company was so great. So I don't know what I did to the battery. Again, I was wearing it pretty excessively and for very long durations. So I may. But anyway, they were so kind and they sent me a new battery because I told them how much I loved it and how much that I would want to share it because of how it has helped me. Funny, I was going to say the word endure winter, which Keith and I talked about as well. But it truly was a way that allowed me to get outside. And if you have listened to this podcast at all, you know how important it is for me, for anyone, for all of us to be getting outside, even in the winter when it's really, really hard. And so it's easy to stay cooped up. It's easy to stay isolated and all of those things. But if you can find tools and help and support to help you get outside, even when it's frigid cold, do that. And so I know it seems like a silly plug for a heated vest, but honestly, it's so much more than that. It is a tool to help you get outside, to help clear your energy, to connect with source, to connect with yourself, to connect with your inner child. There is so much power in getting outside. And so if something like a heated vest gives you a little extra motivation to get out there, do that. So I will put the link here if anyone wants to get one for themselves to help get through winter. I know if you are here in the Midwest, we got a polar vortex coming up. So I am getting all the heated things ready to help me get outside and experience all the healing that Mother Nature gives me. So anyway, I will wrap it up on that and I will take you over to Keith's episode. All right. I have my guest here with me, Mr. Keith. I'm going to put your clam in my head. Batenhorst.
That's correct.
Yes. And he is here representing the Mental Mountains Project. And I heard this story. We were at the coffee shop and all the feels. I had goosebumps for like 2 straight hours. I was brought to tears several times hearing your story.
Same.
And I'm like, I need to have this guy on the podcast to share your story. And so I'm going to share your mission here real quick. And then I'm going to turn it over to you to how this all came about because it's quite the story. And you're going to understand why here real quick. So their mission, Mental Mountains Project, was funded by Keith after his own lifelong struggle with mental health. We all have mountains, and we want to show you that you're capable of overcoming them and living your life to the fullest. We aim to inspire, create awareness, and raise funds for those who otherwise would not be able to afford and receive proper mental health services. And when I read that, one, how amazing that you're doing this.
Thank you.
And also how sad that you need to do this. So share with us a little bit about how this project even came about, a little about yourself, obviously, as well.
Yeah. So as we go through this, there isn't like one linear way that I could say this happened and then that happened and then we went to see. It was kind of like one day I just decided to press play.
Yeah.
Jumped in and it's like we'll figure out the spider web of what we need to connect from there. You touched on it, but like the real root of it is someone who's dealt with mental health, and we'll touch on that later and like how that all came to be. It's incredibly tough to even find a provider.
Yeah.
Incredibly tough, especially post-COVID where everybody found a new connection to that, and we really like started to reduce the stigma around it. People became like more okay with reaching out for help and talking to somebody. There's just not enough providers out there.
Right. There's wait list for this.
Whether it be psychology or psychiatry, there's an incredibly long wait list, and if that's for anybody,
right. If
you want to get connected to the good ones, it's kind of, in a sad way, it's like good luck.
Right.
And then, so it probably took me better part of 15 years to really find somebody that I connected with super well.
Hold up. Because I know people, like pausing on this, that tried working with one person, maybe two, and like, oh, this doesn't work for me. So the fact that you stuck with this for 15 years to find the right fit and what you needed is wow.
Well, thank you. I would say it was not a trend line that always looked like this. It's tough. You're hoping to sit down with that person, like crack you open, and like you're gonna find like whatever the secret code you needed in like session 3, and you're like, cool, I'm good now. We can do like a monthly maintenance program, right? Yeah. But the reality is you sit down. The first couple sessions are like just getting to know you, background, you walk through it, and like if you don't click with somebody, it's really hard to be motivated to keep coming back, showing up fully present, and diving into like this personal part of yourself you've never cracked open.
Right. Well, and from an inner child perspective, if you don't feel safe in that person's energy, you're not opening up, and your ego will find every excuse not to go back. Yeah.
I mean, I would say the first 5 to 6 sessions, usually you're just trying to build trust with someone. And if you're lucky, your provider might take your insurance, right? So most times, like, you might be looking out of pocket. So to show up fully present as yourself, crack yourself open, and it's hundreds of dollars at a time.
And you have to pay for that. You have to pay to do that. Like, why am I paying for this?
Yeah, so you'll kind of get to this point where you're excited. The first couple sessions, you're like, okay, this is a path for myself. We're going to find the thing that clicks. And then there's that diminishing returns. And like, for me personally, my experience was like fell off a cliff consistently. Yeah. So you try to motivate yourself to go back. You might take a 3-4 month hiatus. Stuff gets tough at home. Like you're up in your own head. You're like, hey, let's give this a shot again. Same progression kind of happens. And you just keep going through this bell curve of excitement, investment in it. And I would genuinely admit to you, I probably took off at times a year or so. Yeah. Because at certain points in my life, financially, there's just no way you could pull that off.
That's gonna be the first thing to go.
Yeah, and I don't want to appear like tone deaf. Like I'm in a comfortable position where I can afford it now, and that's why I wanted to do this. But at times, you're making decisions early on, like when I'm in my early 20s, going, okay, like, is it rent or is it my well-being? And you have to make that decision. And there's a times where you're going in the red on credit card going like, how long can I realistically pull that off? And eventually you do the thing, or at least I did, where rip up the page and you go back to doing what you did, which was like, for myself, in periods where I wasn't fully invested in that, I mean, I turned to self-medication, and that was the way that I managed to cope through that. An unhealthy way to bridge the gap between when I could build up enough to go back and try it again. But for me personally, I needed something in between and found unhealthy ways to deal with it. So when I got to a spot where about 4 years ago, found someone that I finally first connected with, and then you're like, okay, this isn't the meme of someone sitting on a couch and me telling my life story. You're like, wow, there's actually actionable, tangible stuff. I'm excited to go. I'm figuring out who I am, and there's a path forward for me. At that point, I always kind of knew once that clicked that I wanted to be someone that could be like a conduit for people to go like, hey, don't give up on this path. Yeah. And I wanted to, as someone who got to a point where had a good job, good career, had developed a stable social circle, as someone who could afford to go consistently. And at times you're going every week. Sometimes it was more than once a week. As someone who's in a good position, you get that bill at the end of the month. You're like, even where I'm at, I don't know how sustainable this is. I wanted to figure out a way to get back, or the people that just need a hand to reach out, grab them, pull them up, and be like, hey, I can help you get the care that you need. And if I didn't find that person 4 years ago, I don't know where I'd be. I wouldn't be sitting in this chair for sure. I know that, like, period, dot, exclamation point, would not be sitting there. Don't know where I'd be, but there's people I haven't met out there. Right. That I'm trying to be that hand that reaches out, grabs them, and says, hey, there's still hope for you. I can help pull you up. Don't worry about the financial aspect of this. I got you. Yeah. Right. And that, to me, that gave me the drive, the purpose, probably furthered my process.
Right. Absolutely.
Even more than where I was at. And like that helped me feel whole to be that person that reaches out and does that.
It's funny as you're saying all this, like, oh my gosh, like I kind of forgot it's coming up on a year of this podcast. And that was honestly a huge reason why I started it, was because people can do private coaching or go on retreats. I'm like, but what about the people that can't do those things? What if I have a free resource, like a podcast, where I can share these stories and people can hear themselves through that? And some people have commented that it's their little weekly form of therapy. And like, I love that. It can give people that sense of feeling connected or heard or seen. And it is, that way of like, how can I help? Because hearing stories like yours and the other people that have been on here, you realize that, wow, we all have stories. We're all going through stuff. We all have these mountains that we're climbing. And that's why your story was like, oh my gosh, because people need to know, like, that one person to say, I got you, or I care enough about you to literally climb mountains to help you. So it's amazing.
Kudos to you. I mean, before I found current path that I'm on, there'd be podcasts, audiobooks, whatever it might be. I'd find one thing just to hold on hope. Right. And it might be I replay that soundtrack. At times, it was multiple times a day. You find that person who's going through it that, hey, maybe you can connect with. You see a part of yourself in that audio, in that person, in that book, in that movie. Like, who doesn't love a comeback story, right? Like, those are the things that I gravitate towards.
Oh, man, for sure.
Where it's like person who, hey, maybe self-inflicted wounds, maybe screwed things up themselves, but figured it out, right? Like, those are my favorite stories. And we latch onto those and, like, play it over and over again, people I've never met. So kudos to you for being that person.
Well, and same to you, because it takes one person, like I said, just to inspire a kid to be like, wow, like maybe resonate with your story and be like, wait a second, he's doing what now? And to really encourage them to take on this mental health mountain, because it really is for so many people. And there was such a stigma, there still is. And so being able to let people know, like, looking at you, I mean, you could stereotype, like, this guy looks like he's got it all together and great job and all this stuff. And then you're like, you kind of open the door and be like, hey, here's my actual story. And to not judge a book by its cover. I think people need to hear that to feel seen in their own stuff. So share a little bit about the journey leading up to what led to this actual. Like you said, there was no process of actually starting it. It just kind of happened. And that's a whole other thing. I did want to talk about that. Like, you just started. You just started. You didn't need to have it all figured out. Just like this podcast, you just hit play. You just start. You figure it out along the way. Because I think that's why so many people hold themselves back from their dreams. Because you want to know how. You want to know all the steps. And it just does not work that way. So.
We'll pull off all the layers here.
Yeah.
So somewhere in my teens and probably even prior to that, I think it's like somewhere inherently within me, like this storm was kind of always brewing. You know, teenage years where it really started opening up. And I remember one day there was like, it's like definitively like there's this date on the calendar and next day was like different, right? Like it is just like this fork in the road where when I had like my first anxiety breakdown, panic attack, it's hard to describe if you haven't gone through that, what that actually means. Like people are like, okay, you're nervous, like you got butterflies in your stomach. And for some people that can be actually true, right? Like in this, for me, it manifested as it's painful, right? You actually feel like you're dying, right? Like I can't tell you the amount of times that like had gone to the hospital and been like, get the doctor back, whatever they told you. The data ain't reading what my data says, right? Like something is wrong.
Yeah.
And when you're trying to sift through that, it never really involved my family. The first time you're kind of told like, hey, you have an anxiety problem or a panic disorder, this is late 90s, early 2000s. You're like, oh, I'm crazy.
Yeah.
Right? So going to friends, going to someone, I didn't.
Right.
Like I just,
So if
your circle was here,
Yeah.
it was just like day after day after day, it just shrunk down and continued to shrink. And when you're going through the physical manifestations of that, slowly isolating your circle, I mean, depression is the next thing that comes along with it. To the point where when I got to like early 20s, there were times where I wasn't sure if I could physically pull myself out of bed to go to work. As someone who, yes, now it climbs mountains, I couldn't run around the block. I had anxiety meds in my pocket because I'm like, I'm not sure if I can walk up this flight of stairs without like having to go to a knee, and was talking to nobody. Didn't confide with a friend, would try to go back to doctors. My early on experience with people that were in the mental health field, the dialogue wasn't centered around like what's going on with me physically. It was like, how's your family life, right? Like it just was like we were on two different planets with what I truly needed as a human.
Yeah.
So, and I would say like, while it was very clear I needed to stay away from what I ended up doing, when you're in that place and you've like lost hope in yourself, and like physically for me, like my day-to-day was painful, not from even like a mental standpoint, but like physically painful. The only thing that I like made like reduce that was drugs and alcohol. I would never describe myself as like functioning alcoholic at that point in time. I know that's from what I used it as a crutch, two totally different paths, but did it a lot more than what people think.
Yeah.
And did it for all the wrong reasons. And if I picked up the bottle, so to speak, it was because I just wanted to stop feeling whatever I was feeling.
Oof.
And experimented with different recreational drugs. I was throwing everything at the wall to not feel like myself.
Right. Just to not feel.
100%. And you're like, hey, if that's what it takes to like feel grounded for a second, because like I know there was a point in time when I didn't feel like this.
Right.
So you'll do whatever to feel like a sense of normalcy.
Yeah.
And not proud of it. It's certainly something that I don't glamorize, would never encourage anybody to do what I did. And I made it worse, right? Like it was something where I can physically remember at times like wondering like, am I going to wake up in the morning? Right. But that's part of why I wanted to like start putting myself out there, was like, I was at ground zero. Like, was at ground zero for sure. And there was never a point for me that I wanted to ever hurt myself. But depression got bad enough to where I would say, there's that knock in like that inner monologue, that like that knocking voice, right? Yeah. And at times I think that voice probably that didn't want to feel anything. Like the words that would manifest in my brain were a lot like, didn't want to be alive. Because you never wanted to hurt myself, couldn't, because inherently I think I knew there was always something like really special in here that it could crack open, and if I could get that out, like that's what kept me going.
Yeah.
But didn't want to be alive anymore. Didn't want to deal with what I had to deal. Didn't want to keep pills in my pocket to get through the day. Didn't want to have to go to a bar stool to have any sort of ability to face social or career pressures. And using that as a crutch, that always did keep people at arm's length, right? Like you're afraid to actually let anybody see you vulnerable.
Yeah.
And you're afraid to open up to anyone. You're like, hey, if anybody figures out like real Batenhorst here, it's game over.
Right.
Like saw myself as a burden, and tapping into when I could be self-medicated. Oh, like a little bit of real me is still there, and it takes something to get that out.
So I'm like, so many things I want to jump in. Keep going.
But
So
in doing all those things, didn't feel like I was giving anything back to myself, the world, people, friends, people that did care about me. Just was doing enough to get by. And like, I knew that's like, it's like the math problem when you're in fourth grade, right? Like the train that's leaving Pittsburgh and the train that's leaving Kansas City. I'm like, at some point these two things meet and blow up and it's game over, right? Like there's only so long that I can keep people hidden from what I've got going on.
Yeah.
And with keeping people at arm's length, it was really hard for me to ever like truly connect with someone. probably close to, I'm 38 now. I'd say probably close to a decade ago, 27, 28, person I consider my best friend now. I was on this path. I hid it from everybody. And part of what inspires me to like be that person that reaches out and like pulls somebody up is who I would consider my best friend now. Like, there was the first person that actually ever like opted in. It was like,
yeah.
Hey, no, like,
I see you.
I don't care about anything else. Like, you're someone who gives everything of yourself. It's a two-way street. And that was the first person that said, regardless of what you've got going on, I see you as you and I'm opting in. Right? Like,
wow.
And that was like the first moment that gave, like, if we're saying like smallest little step that I took, that was probably like the first time I actually took like a real positive step. And that person never said those words, right? It was like, it was unsaid.
Right.
But it
it's
was their
just
actions and how they felt and like how we showed up for each other. And that was the first like real positive step that I took. And like up until said point, romantic relationships, I just said like, hey, we're not doing it. Like there's no way that I could let anybody attach themselves to this boat anchor, right? Like if someone comes around, we're dragging them to the ground because like I know what I do every day.
Right.
So shortly after I started investing in that, you get different reactions to opening up and how I would show up for people, how I communicate it. And any relationship that didn't work out, like they were correct. Like I would fully admit like they made the correct choice for them at that point in time and who I was as a human being and how I was showing up in that. But I went through like a particularly tough one and I had a tough exit. And despite all the positive momentum I had, career, friends, like developing a social structure, very selective on like who I would still let into my story. You're like, hey, I'm going to sprinkle some details here, but like, that's like
the test.
Page 1 of the recipe to see how you react. Because there is a lot of shit back here. Yeah. I felt like I was on such a good path. And then like world fell apart again. Was living like this really nerf like lifestyle, like all the hard edges and putting foam on to make sure they don't actually like fuck this all up. And it had a particular bad setback. And again, this is why people around you and like who you choose to let opt in is so important. I had a friend that knew I was going through it and it was like, hey, it's during COVID. So like everything converging at once, right? Like you're just,
this is the tower moment.
Isolation city.
Yeah.
And he's like, hey, I was like, I know you're afraid of heights. I'm like, I don't think I would use afraid. Like there's some stronger adjectives I would gloss onto that. But he's like, I know you're afraid of heights. He's like, there's this thing. He's like, I've always wanted to do this. He's like, I vacation there. I've got pictures of my house. He's like, I love the Grand Teton. And this is he's like laying this out to me. And when I would say like engaged in physical fitness, like it was all vanity at that point. Cause like, I was terrified I was dying. So I just ate incredibly healthy. I'd go do what I could that was like low level cardio. Cause I'm like, you get me going up a flight of steps, I'm still taking a knee, still couldn't run around the block. He's like, do you want to climb Grand Teton with me?
What?
And at that point I was like ground zero. I was like, you know what? Honestly, I'm like, this thing's going to kill me. Let's do it. It's either going to kill me or it's not. He's not aware of this.
Right. Like, what
right? Like he's not aware that this is my inner dialogue. And I'm like, yep. At this point, I've screwed up enough things. I am 30. We're in COVID. What's this going to look like if I just don't put everything of myself into the next 50 years if I make it that far?
Right.
I know what this page looks like, right?
Yeah.
So get a coach. Coach is going to guide us. We're going for Grand Teton. We got like an 8-month rev up to it. And I felt like we were doing like Navy SEALs buds level workouts. There was times where I'm like, you know what? I'm throwing on like the hardest David Goggins YouTube video on like a loop because I'm like, if I don't have that voice screaming at me, there's no way I'm going to get through this, to the point that I remember collapsing after workouts. They were that intense. We probably overdid it, but like, I'm the type of guy where you give me a program, say you got to do X, Y, and Z. I'm gonna be like, well, I'm gonna do X, Y, Z twice, just so you know. If you want me to do that, then game on.
Apparently, someone said, you want to climb a mountain? You're like, well.
So I was like, Roger that, let's do it. And like, definitively remember like telling my friend, I was like, I'm invested 100%. Caveat that if you never show me what we're doing, never send me a picture of it, never send me a route, I'm in. But I'm like, if you show me what we're doing and I peer over the ledge, I'm like, I know I'm hitting eject. So we'll do this with some caveats.
I love that. What if people just went after a goal like that? Like, I don't even need to see what the end is. I'm just going to trust the process, enjoy the journey.
Well, I knew my personality. I was like, if you show me this, I'm going to freak out and I will obsess about it for the rest of the actual journey. So I'm like, I'm in as long as I don't know what it looks like.
Right. Because ego will find a million reasons why. Oh, I love that. You wouldn't even let ego be a part of it.
No,
like, nope.
my protector would be like, okay, like I'd have a panic attack sitting here. I'm clammy thinking about it.
Oh gosh, I love this. Okay. Sorry.
So, and this was, again, as someone who genuinely could not get out of bed. I'm like, I'm committed to climbing a mountain, I guess, right?
Right.
So we get there. We actually landed in, I think, in Denver was our connecting flight. And I remember like we were eating lunch together and he's like, just, you know, like, I'm playing this YouTube video since you're in the airport. Like, there's no eject button at this point.
You're
so
here.
like, this is about what we're about to do. I definitely don't think I slept very well that night. And showing up, morning of, it's hard to convey where my brain was at, but like morning of doing this, I had written my goodbyes, like journal at home. I was like, I'm not convinced my body can take this. Like, again, that like anxiety, panic, it's crippling. It's hard to describe.
So you were literally, when you said like, this may kill me, but I'm going to try and go for it. Like that was real.
Up here, like again, like your heart rate goes to 200. You're like, well, my max is 180. Right. That can't seem like this is sustainable, right? And like when you're having that daily,
right, it's
terrifying. And you're like, okay, what person goes, I'm going to sign up to be miserable.
Right.
I'm going to sign up to be miserable on this, right? Like, not just like, this is going to be a hard thing for me to do. I'm like, no, this is like 2 days of hell. Yeah. And I'm going to put myself through it because, hey, like, hopefully I get to pull back the curtain. Oz is there and everything magical that you wanted is there. So we did this morning of, like, literally like envelope stuff at home, goodbyes are written in there, like where will stuff's got to go. Like, I'm like, we've burned the boats, we're going up, there's no choice at this point. And like every step away on the journey, you're combating 25, 30 years. Yeah. 25, 30 years of dirty laundry. Yeah. Like pulling stuff. You're like, yep, didn't know that card was still there. Didn't know that bruise still hurt. Like white knuckled through things that never would have thought I was humanly capable of. And the three people that were with me, I mean, I don't get up without them. There was literally moments in time where I can remember, if this mic was the wall, like my forehead's against it, just going, okay, we can do this. We can do this. And you got somebody like patting you on the back, like, hey, I got you, man. Like, we're the four of us. We're linked up. We got this, buddy. Without them, there's not a chance in the world I get up, right? Like you need that voice. Right. You need that encouragement. Yeah. It's what I try to do for people in my day to day. And summit moment, genuinely would say, like, one of those you'll never forget, one of the greatest moments of my life. And as amazing and like beautiful as that was, and one of the best days ever, next day categorically maybe the worst. Wow. And we like told nobody that I was with, but you're like, okay, I'm still me. Like, you in your head, and I think anyone that's ever done something hard, like, okay, cool, when I get that thing, like everything's different.
Right. I get that job. I lose that weight. I get into this relationship. My life will magically be fixed and cured and I'll never have these problems again. And you climbed a mountain and it was like, shit.
Shit's still your shit.
Yeah. Wherever you are, there you are.
I was a firm believer, like whether it's money or success, when you get either of those, you just turn the dial to 11 and it amplifies who you were even more.
Yep.
And that you're not good enough. This voice of you'll never accomplish this. Yeah, you did that, but it wasn't on your own. And look how hard that was. And you could only do Teton. There's people that do Everest and they do less training. And so the next day was, if I was here before, the next day you're like, I broke through the Earth's crust and I'm somewhere in like molten magma. We fell through the basement and was on the flight back home. I can remember thinking about, okay, like what liquor store are we going to? What are we going to do to pull ourselves out of this? Because this feeling was way fucking worse than anything I've experienced. Because like, I thought I wouldn't be nervous today. Yeah. I thought there wasn't going to be any sort of anxiety feelings. I convinced myself I could push myself through it for 2 days straight. What's there to be afraid of now? You're still you. This is still this. Like,
trauma's still there, man.
Wires that aren't wired correctly ain't firing correctly yet.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, if I just went through hell and I'm still me, I'm like, what's the point, right? Like, what literally is the point? Like, the 2 train cars from, they might as well just crash at this point because there's nothing I can do to change me. This is it forever. This is my story. I'm out. And I probably took things way, 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 way harder. I know I took things way harder than what I needed to, right? There was no moment of grace, celebration. I don't even remember if I like gave myself a day just to be a human.
Right. Like to really, truly take in what you just did. I mean, I love that you said you're a protector. And I often, I say ego a lot on here, but I want to make sure people don't think ego is that, oh, well, I'm better than everyone. Like, I climbed a mountain. What did you do today? That can be a version of ego, but really its sole job is to protect your inner child. Mm-hmm. And so all those things that you were talking about before that you were doing, your ego's like, this is how we don't feel. And we don't want our inner child to feel these feelings. So let's turn to alcohol. Let's turn to drugs. But it's also can be that critic, right? Of just, well, you didn't climb the mountain by yourself. And so it's just this, you're right. The noise up there is so loud and it's going to follow you if you don't actually do the work to, So I mean, I did my damnedest to screw my life up for the next year. I did everything I possibly could to just like, let's just grab the zip line straight into mediocrity and go. Like, I'm good. I tried, didn't work, and just tore up every page I could. And that, I wouldn't say like, it was probably worse than self-loathing, right? Like, it was just like, there is no fix. You are broken, dude. Yeah. Like, you are broken. You can't let anybody in your life. We are not dating. I'm not bringing anybody along for this ride. Yeah. It's safer
Let's
to be alone.
throw ourselves at our career.
Yep, that's safer.
Maybe that's my angle, and I can achieve there. And at the end of this life, maybe I can give some money away, and like we can say, hey, we checked the box on being a good human being, right? Yeah. And somewhere along the way, what exact reason? I truly don't know what thread like pulled on it. I think it was a realization of, if I don't do something, like, I'd given up on myself, right? Did not care about myself, did not want to fight for myself. I was like, the only thing I can do, like I've always thought like there's that like special thing inside of me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I hate it at this point. Like, I think I hate myself. I hate how I'm acting. I don't want to show up for this person anymore. Like, the only way I can like save myself from myself at this point is to show up for somebody else. Yeah. Because like for the longest time, you just wanted someone to, like, the reason I did all that shit, like climb Grand Teton, is like because I didn't want to do it anymore. If that makes any sense. Like, yeah. You just wanted someone to see you and go like, fuck yeah, that's my guy.
Yeah, yeah.
And like, this dude's the shit. Like, let's bring him on in. Like, and then you could be like, I can stop. I can rest because I was able to be seen, and now I can just enjoy me and let the special thing out.
Yeah.
But I like totally given up on that person. And I was like, the only way we make it past 40 at this point is I have to do something for other people. Because I'm like, I'm done showing up for myself because I don't respect this person anymore. I don't respect this person that's, drinking and not, and doing it out of a social setting and like doing it to self-medicate. Like I was hiding in the shadows and doing whatever I could to not fail, not have to feel any more pain. Mm-hmm. You're like, I'll just lurk down here because the minute I try to like, it's like Icarus, you fly too close to the sun, you get burned. I'm like, all right, I've been burned enough that let's just take our foot off the gas. Like I am kind of like, let's just be that broken dude and wallow in self-pity. So that was like the first time I was like, I need something or I'm not going to be around.
Right.
And I need to do something for other people because it's the only way I can motivate myself to do this. So I'm like, all right, so I have this idea. Give back. I'm like, well, I don't have any money. So I'm like, that's not it. Like that idea
that plan failed.
That idea is broke. And you're like, well, I guess I can start something charitable because like I feel like I have a big heart. And you're like, well, what am I gonna do? Like be the guy at Christmas that's like ringing the bell outside of the grocery store. That also doesn't seem like it's gonna work. So I feel like I gotta do something like kind of inspiring to raise money. And like, there's, you all have heroes in your life, and they're like, hey, who do I love? Like, who's inspiring? Who's the person that I would like listen as my soundtrack every single day? I'm like, what do they do? And like, they do like documentary type shit, epic stuff that you're like, I'm broken ass Batenhorst. You're like, how am I going to do this? But I kind of feel like the only way to get noticed or like inspire people is I'm like, I think I kind of got to do that. And the happiest I was when I was kicking the shit out of myself to train for Grand Teton. And I'm like, I felt connected to a community and people and felt really driven. And you kind of felt like the Rocky montage where you're like, I'll go carry a log on my back through snow. That sounds like something a badass would do.
Right.
So I was like, I have to do something. I'm like, okay, so we did Grand Teton. And I'm like, I also don't have the skill set to like, if you get into like the climbing world and you start realizing how technical it is,
you're gosh.
You're like, I might as well just build a car, right? Like I can't. I need a class,
right,
literally
you're not just
classes.
climbing out, like going for a casual hike.
Yeah, and then like the gear, like there's a barrier to entry to get into that sport. And I was like, okay, so like climbing seems like the thing that I want to do. And in the climbing community, like the word project gets like attached to like the end of it a lot. Like you'll be like, I'm doing this project or that project. And there's a guy who has a famous documentary, NIMS, and it's called 14 Peaks, and his thing was Project Possible. And I'm like, okay, I kind of like resonate with that. And so I was trying to figure out a way to like rope that in right away, because that seemed like in that world the noun that gets thrown at the most. And then I was like, well, if we're gonna do something to raise money for people that struggle through mental health, I was on a road trip, and I'm just like, I got like 6 hours in the car, and I'm just like ruminating on ideas and a cup of coffee, right? So I'm probably overly caffeinated on this like idea high. I was like, mental this, mental that. And I'm like mental, like if you're overcoming something and I want to climb mountains. I'm like, mental mountains, that's a word, right? That's like something you overcome. So most of them like mental mountains projects. I'm like, okay, that seems like a thing. And then I'm like, well, I kind of have I need like a moniker, like a hashtag. And I was like, well, what am I trying to do? Or like, what am I trying to inspire? And I'm like, how many people are really going to connect with like mountain climbing? Like probably not a lot. But I was like, whether it's a mountain or I'm like, at one point I couldn't get out of bed.
Right.
I was like, okay, it's like, you're all dealing with your own, like your shit's your shit. And like, no matter what it is, that is the most in your brain, that is the most impossible thing you could think of to overcome.
And it doesn't matter, like comparing it to anyone else's story is like, that is yours.
Yeah.
Like
for that person, your hardest mountain to climb is your hardest mountain to climb, regardless of what you got going on, right? And I would never tell anybody that person A versus person B, like their thing is harder than the other person's thing, right? Like there's some nuance to that. I get it. But like your hardest thing to you is your hardest thing.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, like,
Yep.
I'm like, okay, what's lean into the fact of you're all trying to like climb your own mountain. So I'm like, this seems like my thing, right? So I'm like, all right, I've got this charity name. I've got like a little, I'm like, if I can ever figure out social media, I'm a hashtag climb your mountain. So I was like, I'm gonna press play on this, but I have no idea how. I've never started a business. I don't know how to start a 501c3. To be totally frank, I didn't even know what that meant, or like how I apply for that.
What?
So I got
got
like
an
this
anger in there?
6-hour car ride where I'm like, hey Siri, like, can you look up this? And I like eventually got enough notes in my head. I got home, crack open the laptop, and this is a Sunday afternoon where I'm like, we're figuring this out. Apply for a business name. Like, does anybody own Mental Mountains Project? And like within, I would say, a month, every ball was up in the air, and I'm like, we're doing this.
Here we
like
go.
the licenses are applied for. We've got a name. We've got a foundation set up. I'm like, so then logical next step was, what the hell am I going to do? So I'm like, again, I'm 5'9", Keith Batenhorst, 35-year-old male. I'm like, who gives a shit about what I'm trying to do or why I care about mental health? And I'm like, I don't even post on social media, let alone have Twitter or Facebook. So my reel probably ain't hitting the top of the charts tomorrow. So it was like, okay, I need
Wait
to...
until after this podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's why we're here. So I'm like, to go, like, it's like, how, I don't even know how to raise money other than like the people in your family
Right.
being like, that's the
Hey,
easy
Grandma.
part where you're like, hey, grandma, $50 would be super cool. And you can write it off, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah. And so I was like, okay, we're doing this thing. It's year one. I was like, well, I don't even know what I want to do as my fundraiser or what event or like what would inspire people. I'm like, okay, so like grab your journal. What scares the shit out of me? And like, also, my first year, I want to set the bar as high as I can think to go.
Yeah.
I'm also like, hey, I'm, running across north to south on Africa. I'm not that guy yet, right? So picked out, I'm like, what's the craziest thing that I can actually realistically in the next 18 months set a target towards and be like, this scares the shit out of me every single day. But God damn it if it doesn't get me out of bed every day, like ready to fight for somebody, right?
Oof. Yeah.
And you do the thing where you go vision board, like you're printing off pictures of shit.
Yeah.
And what I landed on, I'd taken a safari at the end of 2017. So we were in Cape Town, we first landed, and like the actual first ever literal mountain I climbed was not very intimidating on the scale. But in back-to-back days, I'd climbed Table Mountain in Cape Town and then Lion's Head in Cape Town. And like two of the most like beautiful days of my life. But also was like peak suffering through panic attacks and anxiety and depression,
Sure.
and were incredibly challenging. And the person I was with had no idea I was going through any of this shit.
Can you imagine having a panic attack and then trying to hide a panic attack? You're just, the amount of stress it takes on your body to be experiencing it, but then to try to hide it. Like,
It's you shut down.
Oh my
right? Like
gosh.
you're
Yeah.
when it's like white knuckling and like shutting down, like
real.
It's you can do it and you get really good at hiding it. Really damn good at hiding it. I've equated it to a person who's nervous at public speaking and gets up there and forgets the line that they were supposed to bring up.
yeah.
And then nobody else ever knows.
Yeah.
And like you get really good at knowing that you're like, hey, I think I might need to go to the hospital right now, but I'm going to stay at lunch right now. You get really good at that. But you're showing up like a lesser version of yourself. And in
Right.
those moments too, like, like, hey, an extra snack break would sound good right now. You just feather in things to make it seem like it's normal day to day. But in truth, you were like, I literally am like about to take a knee here. So, hey, my man, can you just hold up for a sec? Because I need to like compose myself and get to a point where I can figure out a way how we're going to keep going north here. So I resonated with those things. I'm like, it was in Africa. I had an amazing time on safari. And it's just something about that always resonated with me. I'm like, I want to go back.
Yeah.
And have a good friend who's from Kenya, and they talked about taking a trip, and knew that Kilimanjaro was on the Tanzania-Kenya border. And I'm like, I've had this feeling and like this poking of I want to go back.
Interesting.
And I was like, yeah, I think that's my thing. And so you Google it, figure out like, okay, timeline to train. Can I do this? What are the routes? And I had the podcast I listened to that this person, they raised money for digging wells and clean water in Africa. And their fundraiser is Conquering Killian. I'm like, I just love how that sounds. Like Conquering Killian. It felt like it clicked with me. So I'm like, that's our thing. I'm like, Kilimanjaro, that's what we're doing. One of the 7 summits, 19,000 feet. For reference, Grand Teton was 13.7. So I'm like, we're going a mile further. So I'm like, that's my dude. This is what we're doing. Roger that. Sign me up. All the monikers you could throw at it.
Yeah.
I booked the trip and I was like, okay, we have a deadline, a date. We're going.
Wow.
And so that's how we came up with our first fundraiser for 2024, which was I can't describe how impactful 2024 was.
Yeah.
But our mission and all the people that showed up to support it, everybody that donated, the amount of friends that were like, hell yeah, I connect with your story. My goal was to raise $5,000, and my goal was to hopefully just make a donation to somebody of, hey, like, do this, give this to somebody who's in an economically diverse position. But we raised $17,000.
Wow.
In our first year with the least cool social media platform ever. I'm getting better at it, but like just word of mouth and grassroots and selling hats and t-shirts and putting myself out there and like not having any idea if I could pull it off. And true to who I am, like after I committed to Kilimanjaro, had told friends we did Grand Teton with. We've also been kind of like looking for something to do as a group together. Like, you want to do Mount Whitney like 3 weeks before? Like, I was like, yeah. I'm like, but again, don't show me what we're about to do, right? Like, I'm like, I don't want to know. I don't want to know what cliff I'm going to be looking down at. And then had done a ton of like training before, and I knew from rucking and lifting and running, it's just a ton of strain on my knees. So I'd always been looking for different ways to like train aerobically without just necessarily breaking my body.
Right.
And I'm like, well, I'm training for 2 mountains. Like, I need to figure something out here. And so then I was reading books, and biking and swimming seemed like really good ways to do it. So I'm like, well, I guess I could just get in the Ironman game too. So
I guess I could just do an Ironman, just or a different breed.
So we decided to do that all in 6 weeks. And I was scared shitless. Like, I was scared shitless for all 3, because when it was just me on Grand Teton, I was like, okay, if I die, whatever. And when I had committed to this successive window of events, now you're like, pressure's on, right? Like, I'm trying to do something for other people, and like, you're felt like finite. I'm like, I don't feel like I got 2 cracks at this. If I don't pull this off, who's showing up for year 2 and wanting to donate? All things people have told me afterwards, like, we didn't care, dude. We just were really inspired by what you were doing, right?
Oh my gosh.
But in the moment, you're like, well, if the first movie flops, who the hell's making a sequel, right? Spielberg ain't showing up for round 2 at this point.
What I love, I'm having, like, as you can see, a very like, because this feels like it all comes down to worthiness. At one point, well, I'm not worthy enough to do this to live for, but I can show up because other people are, and I want to help them. And in turn, you found out, oh wait, I actually am. All these people are like, dude, you're worthy just because you're you. Whether you finish this Ironman, whether you climb this mountain, we believe in you. You're worthy just because you're you. You don't need to achieve this thing for us to love you and care for you and donate to your cause. So in this roundabout way of you not feeling worthy, found out you're freaking worthy. Like,
yeah, and you go through struggles, right? Like, stuff gets dark. It still kept like people in the dark. I had hinted about like my journey through mental health and like hinted at it, but again, you're like, like, I'm gonna give you this part of the story because this puzzle piece over here is pretty gross. And you're like, we'll start with this corner piece. Like, shit over here, that's off limits for a bit. And like a day before first event, I would say like for sure cry for help, because like it was like part, hey, if I'm going to do this in like the day before journey, I'm going to put my like real story out there.
Yeah.
And it was for sure like, I would say 51% like cry for help, 49% real story. Yeah. So I was like, I'm still like hanging on by a thread, guys. And like, I've been, someone asked about my story, but I'm like, I am hanging on by a thread every single day. And I had put this post out there and like talked about, hey, real me and like what I'm doing and why. And like that, I'll probably actually get emotional, which I usually don't, but
you're in the
I'll
right
probably
place.
get emotional.
We celebrate that here.
Yeah, it shouldn't diminish, but that's why I'm here. But like the amount of inbound, like texts, phone calls, people that I never even knew also were walking parallel journey to what I did, were like, me too. And I've never been able to talk about my shit until you did. And do not give a shit if you do this, you fail at all three. We're here for whatever ride bucks you or doesn't buck you. We love you. Don't give up. If you fail, come back 10 times harder and go after whatever, because you've inspired me on a journey. And if your life is just a series of failures, but you keep showing up, then maybe that's your fucking story, man. And I kind of like it. Like if you want to know anything about any of those events or what I'm about to do next year or this or goals and plans and why I'm doing that, like we peel off whatever layer it is, right? But like even after accomplishing those things, like it's like Grand Teton. I woke up the next day exactly the same. And I feel like if you just had like a stack of paper, right? It's like I feel like this journey and like, you know, psychiatry and psychology and what I've been doing, I might be pulling off like, there's a million sheets of paper, I feel like I've taken off like 6.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you're like, so this is going to take a really long time.
Right. Yeah.
You're like slowly thawing this out. It's like melting the polar ice caps. I'm like, I don't even know. Like there's progress. I feel better, but I'm like, this journey ain't ever going to stop. But I'm like, hey, maybe my thing is, do I have the ability to just keep showing up?
Yeah.
And I'm like,
well, you talk about like the word insurmountable on your website. It can feel that way.
There's one thing I'm really good at, it's suffering, right? Like I can suffer like a son of a bitch.
Yep.
And if I can keep showing up, I'm like, that's why I wanted to do this stuff anyway. I'm like, skills, sports, hand-eye. I'm like, that ain't my bag of tricks. I'm like, you just need me to do something really dumb for a long time. I can turn my brain off and do this dumb stuff with the best of them. So I'm like, that you just need me to do that. Write the program on your dude.
Wow. Yeah. Man. Well, you talk about that stack of papers can feel insurmountable, but when you see it as just taking the layers off like that, it almost brings me back to what we had talked about earlier was the daily struggle and kind of what that even led to for you of just helping people acknowledge the daily struggle that we go through. Like, yes, it can feel like a mountain, but you can still layer by layer, peeling that back and just getting through day by day.
Yeah. I mean, I'm on probably year 15 of like genuinely trying to make this better. And there's boxes and doors that have been open where I'm like, I would have never in my wildest dreams, like the person who's sitting in this chair is like fucking recognizable, like unrecognizable human being to where I was in 2012, 2010. Never would have imagined in my wildest dreams that I could pull some of that stuff off. So I'm like, I couldn't run around the block. And now I'm planning out stuff where I'm like, that seems like I could do probably like 4 of those things in a year. What do you think, coach?
Right. How many Ironmans? How many mountains?
Like, what do you think, coach? Right. Like, I'm like almost like arrogant. Like, what is this guy?
Because at this point, it's like, it doesn't feel like you're afraid to fail anymore. Like, I'm just putting in the effort. I'm going to show up regardless. Like, my worthiness isn't determined by whether I like fail or not. You obviously, when you go in with that mentality, we tend to far exceed what we even thought. And failure isn't even really an option. But when we get so focused on that, like it's hard for you to show up and you're like, I'm just showing up regardless.
Yeah. I'm still terrified to fail. I don't want to diminish that impact for anybody, right? I never had and I never allowed anyone to be like my foundation, right? Like I would come back, and I was convinced from whether it was from 5 years old to now, convinced that the event defined me. Failure defined me, because like there was nothing, no other thing other than my voice going like, no, we love you regardless of that, like unconditionally, like we're in on this. So it was like when shit didn't go good, I was like, oh dude, you are the problem. Everybody else in this journey here is like on a different level. You don't belong. And I have a foundation now. Yeah. But still, like when stuff doesn't go well, it hurts. It hurts a lot. And that failure part is terrifying.
Still like, there.
But like, if I had like one trait that I would say I'm elite at, it's resilience. Like my ability to show up is something that I am really proud of. That's probably the only thing I've ever been really proud of, is of like, I can get my ass kicked and still show up. I don't know. That's probably the only thing that kept me from hurting myself, was like, all right, like I can take some more pain, right? Like I still got this. I can still, and like I did it alone, and sometimes would be alone in that pain, but I can always still make that choice and decision to keep showing up. And people that haven't found that hope yet, yes, a big part of like what I want to do in raising money is to get people the proper care, because I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist. I couldn't give professional advice and help if I wanted to, right? But you couldn't have screwed your life up any more than I did. I don't even know if it's possible. And be someone where I'm like 2% of the way on a good path, right? Like,
here I am.
Like you got this. Like if you don't think you got it, no, I'm living proof that you can do this shit. Like I had no skills. I had no background. I didn't have a bike. I literally broke my bike in half. I had to text a picture of it to my coach going, yep, I did that. Don't know how. Like if I can do this, anybody.
I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm still showing up.
Cliche for a reason.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound like that cliche, but I am proof that if you just keep doing stuff, and setbacks suck. It's hard to convince yourself and motivate yourself when you've had really bad setbacks, or when your trajectory all of a sudden was doing this and you're in the bottom of a bell curve, and then you're like, then you go through the basement of the other bell curve and you're like, I don't even know how to flip the next page over. I'm like, sometimes showing up and going deeper into the hole is fine, in my opinion, right? If you just keep doing it, eventually something comes around. We're not so broken that like it's never going to click. Sometimes, maybe sitting down, getting a coach, figuring out stuff,
giving yourself
might
support.
Be the best medicine. Mine, I would say sometimes my methodology was like blunt force, right? Like if you can just tell me I got to just keep showing up and hammering away at something, I'm like, I'm going to break that fucking rock.
Yeah.
I don't know when it is, but if you just need me to show up and keep hammering the hell away at something, I'm like, the hammer's going to break before I am. And I will do this. Even if it gets me nowhere, I will do this until I stop.
Wow. What's interesting too is from going from such isolation as a form of protection, right? Because ego's like, well, I don't want to bring anyone into this. I don't want to let anyone see me. When you did let people see you, truly see you, oh my gosh, look at all the love and support that you got. And all this time, ego was like, what? Like really your inner child was probably too, like, if you would have just let people see the real me and the struggle and all of the things, people actually did love and care and could support you. And ego spent all of those years trying to cover up the most vulnerable and the best parts of you. And I think if people can see that, like all of the things we let ego do to protect us and keep us safe is what keeps us away from, like you said, that tapping into that really special thing that was inside of you. And when you finally allowed yourself to be vulnerable, it just blew that open to where you could actually feel that, whoa, people are there for me. And when you went from such isolation during that period to then getting a coach, that's sending a really powerful message to your inner child, like, I'm actually worthy of this. I have a goal. I want help. I want support. that's a huge, whether you realize you're doing that or not, like that's what you did, was say, hey, you know what? I'm going to call you little LK. Little Kevin. Like, you're worthy. You don't have to do this alone. You can be supported through your journey. Because you said, like, when you were in your teens, like, just slowly that circle got smaller and smaller, when really, if we could have let people in even at that age and gotten help and support. And so whether that's therapy or, finding a training group or whatever it is, it's really easy to isolate because we don't want to let people in. We don't want people to know our story, but that's sometimes the most healing thing you can do.
Yeah. The dichotomy of that is, for a long time, you were trying to do something really special so that, like, people could see you, and then you could just be, like, real you.
Yeah.
Like, oh, if, like, someone sees, like, how, like, much awesome shit I got here, like, I just need to do something to, like, get that out there.
Yeah.
And I still inherently, I would say, like, I'm probably, like, 90% in that bucket, right? Like, you still are hoping for that.
Yeah.
But you're doing that so you can just be yourself. You're like, what the?
Right.
Like, it's hard not to, like, tomorrow I will wake up and feel that way. I will. And I know that.
It's become default.
Yep,
like, that feels like the baseline is that one. Really, it should be this, but that's.
Because you're like, everything that I've dealt with for 38 years. And bad choices I made. And, like, yes, all that stuff leads you down the yellow brick road of, like, today.
Yeah.
But it is, like, still really scary to go, well, if I am not person that just shows up and gets their ass kicked every single day, what am I?
Who am I?
So you're like, well, who am I at that point? So it's really hard just to be like, yeah, I'm going to stop and just be. That's a way, if I could, like, grab, it's so much easier to be like, hey, Tammy, like, just do that. Why would you not want to do anything else? That's, like, happiest version of you. Mm-hmm. But then I was extremely depressed people. It's very common for us to go, what I'm about to say next is, but then I'm not achiever.
Yes.
And then I'm not striving.
Yep.
And then who actually am I?
What good am I?
Like, all those things you love about yourself from, like, I'm just trying to, like, get somebody to see that.
Yeah.
You immediately flip it and you're like, that's all bad. Like, you just flip it on yourself because you're like, all those things I want people to see must be bad if I want them, if I want to be those things, right? Like, I'd love to twirl pasta in Italy and
right?
walk around and not climb up whatever dumb mountain I'm about to go up, right? Like, I would much rather go that path.
Right.
But you're like, that path is all the negative things about yourself of, like, easy button, it's committing to complacency and being okay. Mm-hmm. Like, if I'm okay with who I am, then I'm never going to be who I want to be, right? Like, it's just this dichotomy that you constantly struggle with, even though I know that's best, healthiest version of myself. And, like, I want to shake the inner me and, like, wake up. Like, this could be way easier.
Yeah.
Like, until I get there, I'm going to show people it's possible for them, right? I don't know if it's possible for me yet, but until I get there, I'm going to show people it's possible for them.
Well, and that's such a beautiful thing, is that it isn't always, it's sometimes the journey and showing people the journey, because it's easy to, look at someone like, well, I could never climb a mountain like he did. But then when you actually start to break it down and see the daily things that you had to do to show up for yourself, people can start to see, oh, it wasn't like he just magically decided to climb a mountain one day. Like, that was a lot of not just physical work, mental work, emotional work, healing that you had to do to be able to go through all of that. And what's so interesting is, we talk about, if I'm not achieving, if I'm not literally climbing a mountain, who am I? What am I worth? And again, it's all coming back to that worthiness. Like, if we're always going to want outside validation from people to tell us that you matter, but it's like, do I believe that? And it's like turning that back around, because really your inner child only needs that from you. And until you find that within you, no amount of mountains you climb is going to be enough. And, like, you can climb that. And like you said, I got to the top, and the next day I still felt like shit. Like, because there was still work to be done. It's like, this was one peak, but do you still believe you're worthy even if you didn't climb this mountain?
Mm-hmm. I think it's common for coach, like, super common in athletics. Like, what to tell someone to do.
Yeah.
Like, I know the answer.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, it's so common in coaching, leadership, like, to do it myself.
Uh-huh.
Right? Like, well,
Yeah.
Take that, right? Like,
It's so true. I always tell people this whole process of healing or inner child work, whatever you want to call it, however you want to phrase it, it's so simple. It's just not easy because really your inner child just needs exactly whatever it is that you're searching for. It just needs that from you. It needs the validation from you. It needs you to feel worthy of you. So it's like, oh, okay. But then you have to go through, like you said, 25, 30 years of your ego protecting you and telling you the complete opposite. And even in those moments of feeling that, the next morning you can wake up and you're right back where you were, like, what the? And I think that's something I've had to embrace on my journey as well, as realizing that it wasn't always a setback. Maybe this was a different level of that. You know, I'm peeling that paper back. I'm getting deeper into that wound. This is a different level of my worthiness. You know, it started with feeling better just physically to then realizing I was worthy of a career that fulfilled me. I was worthy of a relation. You know, it was like, oh, and they got to the depths of that worthiness. Yeah. And it was like, oh shit.
So life happens for you, not to you kind of thing.
100%. Yeah. I love setbacks for that reason. And when you kind of go in with that mentality, like, I don't know how, but I'm going to figure it out because this is obviously coming up for me for a reason. And if this mountain wasn't good enough, it's showing me that there's something more within me that I need to work through and climb and all that jazz, man. Whew. That's good stuff. Get a little fired up. I can't tell. Sometimes I need like restraints sitting in my chair. So I want to go, I don't even know how long we've been. We're over an hour. But because this is very much, we talked about inner child stuff and it's very clear to see how your ego tried to protect little you throughout all of that with substances and isolating and even the panic attacks and those types of things. Like that's you're in fight or flight, right? If you're feeling dysregulated for whatever reason. And so walking us back even a little bit before just childhood stuff, because like sometimes I've talked on here about people have big T trauma or small T traumas. Maybe it's just there was tension in the house or whatever it was, or just parents that had high expectations because they cared about you, like just little things like that. Like, what do you feel like maybe set the stage for some of that internal feeling of like, whoa?
Yeah, I think whether it was like best case, worst case scenario for me, for whatever reason, friends throughout my life have always just been super naturally gifted at a million things, right? And my hand-eye, my just like, you know, natural wittiness, ability to think on my feet's never been like super robust. And like you'd go to the playground, right? And you get dodgeball and you're like, whack, just like hits you in the face. Like, the fuck was that? And you're like, Mikey over here slinging. I just got hit in the side of the, like,
yeah.
What? And then, so you go back home or like, I loved basketball as a kid. And my friends were all great. And you go play hoops and you're like, I can't dribble for shit. And this ball don't seem to do whatever. I can't twirl it on my finger. It flies off. My brother was naturally talented. And like when you're a kid, the other kids aren't like, hey, so we got a fundamentals class at like 2 p.m. Me, like Mickey and Timmy, we're all going down there. You're like, they're just good. We just play together. I'm just not good. So I would go home and didn't know anything other than, hey, I want to catch up to not be last dude picked, right? So from that inception point, whether it was like arithmetic, whether it was music, or it was something artistic, athletic, I was like, things just didn't come super natural. So what did I do? I was like, I would isolate myself. Like basketball is probably the easiest thing to think. Like, I was like, okay, I'm just convinced from the minute I get off the school bus, I'm like, we're going to grab the basketball and just like shoot until it's pitch black. And I'm like, wait, I didn't get much better, right? Like that didn't work.
This is not like, the Michael Jordan story I've heard.
Yeah, you're like, I don't think there's scouts driving by Berlin, Wisconsin right now going, a Batenhorst kid. So then the next day, you'd be like, what do I need more? Just more of that. Just keep doing more of that, right? And I never developed this thing of like figuring out learning curve, right? Like it was like I would just show up and just throw myself at stuff because there was no one showing me the path, no one giving me that foundational skill set, no one saying, hey, like before you're going to paint with, hey, we're not going to use oil painting right now, but we're going to do low level skills. We're going to draw a sunset, right? Something like that. I just convinced you just draw and get to the end of the book. And at the end, it's like Van Gogh, like we have MC Escher's stairs at the end. Like it's like page 50 looked as shitty as page 1. I'm like, I don't get, but I was convinced that I was it just drilled this thing into me. And I'm like, you inherently must not be enough. Ooh, because no matter what you do.
Yep.
And it was just, I never asked the right questions, right?
Or had the right help or guidance to find your thing.
It wasn't like somebody was reaching out and saw you struggling and say, hey man, like, don't shoot like that. Your elbow's way out of position. So I was just convinced that I need to extract every ounce out of this lemon as possible, like squeeze it dry.
Yeah.
And that's got to be the answer. And no matter what skill set it was in life, I'm like, hey, you referenced the need a coach. I'm like, fuck, if I need a coach, I need like a team of people at MIT doing a test on me. That's what we need. I'm like, I need the whole university bringing me along for the ride. And I don't, again, like it's a hard thing not to blame yourself. I never asked. Like I never sought out anybody. I never tried to pull on that thread. I was like, I'll just keep showing up. And then it became like this point of pride of like, my heroes became those people. My heroes became like that comeback story. Like I talked about, like I look at Kobe Bryant and go, he's a loner. I love that. Like, that's my dude. I'm going to get his jersey and wear that every day to school. Cause I'm like, he does the same thing. And he's the guy that's waking up at 4 a.m. I'm like, he must be the person that I'm supposed to embody myself afterward, that person that didn't have any ingrained talent. And I'm like, and sometimes it's super painful when you grab the right book, or you finally get that right podcast or right coach or somebody where like, did you know you could have just done this the whole time?
Right.
Honestly, when you find those answers, sometimes that's so freaking painful.
What?
It's worse. It's worse than if I never found out, because you're like, so for the last 20 years, it actually could have been simple. You have like this grief period where like I've cried before where I'm like, all of a sudden you find the answer and the next day you know it's easier. But I broke down crying going like, holy shit, did I fuck up the last 25 years?
But you think about it as a kid, as a 5-6-year-old kid or whatever playing basketball, when you never had that or even thought to ask someone for help. If that foundation wasn't there, you don't feel safe maybe asking for help. For
whatever reason, my psychology was internalized, right?
Right. Like I will figure this out myself. And then ego will take that, well, I'm not worthy of getting it. It'll take that one little thing and turn it into this massive story to now where you have learned to endure so much that you can run Ironmans and climb mountains because it's like back on that basketball court. And when someone just like reaches out and like shows you something, probably takes you all the way back to the basketball court. If someone would have just corrected my freaking form, I could have been out there playing with those kids and I could have like, the trajectory of my life could have been different. Like you're right, there's absolutely a grieving period. If someone would have just saw me, if someone would have cared just enough to take 5 minutes of their time. And that again, it all comes back to worthiness. Like if I just someone would have thought I was worthy of helping. But obviously now you can see this was all a part of your path. And you were always meant to go through this and climb that mountain to see that I always was. And I was that kid on the basketball court who was still worthy, even though he sucked at basketball. That just wasn't his thing. This turns out this is his thing and it's really fucking cool.
Yeah. You gave me path A versus path B. Like, sometimes it's hard to pick. You're like, okay, if I could have been on that journey, does that seem easier and happier? $1,000,000,000%. Like, yeah, no shit. Like, that seems awesome. Why wouldn't you want all those things you haven't had the whole time?
Right. Part
of you is going like, yeah, path B might be cooler at some point. Like, you hope.
Yeah.
It's the thing where you're like, hey, if all this shit of like trudging through hell, it always gets better, right? There's always like a different door where you're like, or different periods where I'm like, I've had like these little moments where I'm like, whoa, if in like the next 60 days, a couple of these things click, that was worth it.
Right.
And sometimes they fall apart where you're like, fuck this. Like, that was not worth it. Right? You're like, I didn't get the thing, so this seems way worse. But then like you get a little bit better and you're like, whoa, like now these other two things that there's no way I could have been introduced to.
Right.
Had I not gone through all this, like that would be freaking awesome.
Yeah.
And I'm still looking for that thing to stick for sure. But I'm on a path now, or like you said, the word, I think, endure. I would definitely resonate to that word, that endure. If I had to like write down like traits, right? I don't know truly what I was inherently born with. I just kind of get the two conflated. Is this a trait or is this like a learned skill? And the ability to endure, I truly don't know. If you ask somebody like a psychologist, is that a trait? Is that a learned skill? What is that? Does somebody just born with that genetic ability?
Right.
But I've got that. However it came to be, that's something I don't have to think twice about. Like if you said we have like just 60 more days and like just keep showing up, I'm like, yeah, we can do this for forever. You start that treadmill, I'm good. There's like a Will Smith quote, and he's like, if you get on a treadmill, there's two things happening. Either I'm going to die or you're getting off first.
Ooh.
Those are the things that keep you going in like Grand Teton training. But always have like, I mean, there's things like that. You pace around your house, and that's one of them where it's like, yep, feel the same way. Like if we show up, like there's two things going to happen. Like I might lose in speed. I might lose on just God-given gifts and genetic ability, but I will not be outworked, not be out hustled. However you want to take that. Like I've had different periods of my career where, being public and vocal about this in my like professional career, hard. Like if I was our competition, like, I'd use it as a way to knock me down. Same breath, I'm like, honestly, do it. Post this, send this to them. Like take this podcast, send it to all the people that you want to think this makes me a lesser version of, right? Because I'm like, for the last 30 years, I've been swimming with one hand tied behind my back. So
I've
fuck
been
you.
my own bully. Like you got nothing on me.
Fuck you, do it. Like there's nothing you can do. Like put it on a billboard. There's nothing you can do that would
There's
hurt.
no shame to your story anymore. And that is healing. That is powerful. That is the gift, is that you don't have to carry shame around about that anymore, because you can see how it was all part of your story to be able to inspire others that are in that. Like you were given your story for a reason and you did something with it. Now you're going back, metaphorically to that kid on the basketball court and saying, hey, like, here's how you would, shoot that. Yeah. But here's some help so you can go get counseling, therapy. Like that's basically what you're doing, is holding out your hand to that little boy. It's reparenting all over, and it's just the most feel-good story in what you're doing. And that's what I love, that sometimes, I think in terms of inner child, and hearing you share your story, there wasn't like any talk about that, but like, that's literally what this is. And it's so beautiful. You didn't even know that you found your own worthiness, that you reparented that little boy within you. And it's just like, this is how this shit happens. And it's so beautiful. Like little Kevin feels so proud of you. Keith, I just called you Kevin. Oh my God. Sorry. I was thinking Kevin because little Kevin was from Tellurian. And on his episode, he met little Kev. I'm sorry. I just had a moment of thinking about that episode because he was like, I didn't know I had an inner child.
I didn't know if like little Kev was a alter ego for you. So I was like, I didn't think you were grafting it onto me. I was like, I'll roll with it.
We'll edit that out. God. No, it's because I said, like, you're so connected to your inner child and you didn't even know it, because he was doing these things just in his life, and he's CEO of a pretty tough job of dealing with addiction and all this kind of stuff, but he has fun and he stays connected to the things he loves. I'm like, you didn't even know little Kev's in there. And so for you, like little Keith's fucking proud of you. It's really cool.
Thank you.
So on that note, geez, Tammy, way to round it out. That was the biggest blubber I've ever had. I'm sorry about that.
Nah, we got you.
He's like, you don't even see me, Tammy. You called me the wrong name. I absolutely see you. So, well, before we wrap up, share what's coming up, how people can support, how they can donate, all the things, because I would love for this audience, for this podcast to get out there to help raise funds for this, because what an amazing cause to be able to help.
So I have to be somewhat a little bit ambiguous too on, so right now, program I've set up with a local provider here, and I say the word ambiguous is like, I am subsidizing right now therapy for 2 people, and I've committed to whether or not we raise money, I said, I will commit to, they have therapy for life. I will personally donate at that point. Because I don't want this to feel like something where like foster care, where they could potentially, and I'm not knocking foster care obviously, but like,
But you're right though.
where they could be in a program and then lose that. So I'm like, 2 people for life have therapy for as long as they want it. And provider is someone that after meeting with them, these might be that team of smartest people I could imagine in this field. And we don't have an infinite amount of resources right now, so I don't want to throw their name out there and have people call them saying, hey, can I tag in on that? But goal would be to get at some point where we can.
Absolutely.
And regardless of provider in the local Madison area or city you might live in, this is a common case for all of them of like, they have people who call daily, I need help. And if you're a pay for provider, people hear the rates, people hear the wait list, or no, I can't take on a client. Like, I am at my literal bandwidth and working overtime. They get discouraged, and you hear that all the time. Like, beautiful, if I can be that person that if you genuinely think you can help them, because I want the provider to be all into, right?
Right.
I want it to be forced marriage. I'm like, I want you to be like, I want to help you. If you think you can help them, want to help them, I'm like, me, I got that person, right?
Yeah.
You make that choice, I got that person for life. So we have that currently enrolled 2 clients that like you get goosebumps for them. Like, I gave them the choice. I said, if they want to meet me at some point, cool. If they don't, hey, it's that invisible olive branch that's been handed to them that I'm okay with, right? Like, I get that you're dealing with, again, like you're climbing your own mountain. That's your shit. That's your stuff. I respect that. You don't have to ever thank me. I just wanted to do this. So having said that, we've already started fundraising for next campaign. So this year, currently working on, we're going to have 2 half Ironmans right now. I swim like a stone, so we're working our way up to a full. I'm getting there. 2026 is the goal, but 2 half Ironmans. Going to climb Mount Blanc in July, which is the highest point in the Alps. Ooh. Throws a new element into climbing skill set, and there'll be some ice and snow climbing. I get to take that course there. We will be climbing Grand Paradiso in the same 3-day window, which is the highest point in Italy. So we're knocking off those 2 in a 3-day window. Then I'm dipping my toe into the trail running world.
Yeah.
Yep. So UTMB is like the thing that makes me light up the most. This is just somebody who couldn't like run around the block before saying that. So I'm going to enter the UTMB World Series.
What does that stand for? Just people that don't know.
So it's Ultra Trail du Mont Blanc.
Okay.
It is actually a race around Mont Blanc, which is why I want to go there first, climb that sumbitch, and then
just run around it.
So it's you run through 3 countries. I've been a fan of it for a while. Never saw myself as somebody that could even think about saying, I'm going to sign up for that. It's a 106-mile race with 32,000 feet of elevation change, which is the equivalent of running up Everest from 0 to, you're going 3,000 feet higher actually than Everest, through 3 countries over the course of a lot of people, like a day and a half. If you win, it takes you 20 hours. So
wow,
couldn't think of anything that like lights me up more that I want to strive towards. So I wanted to go to Mont Blanc, do that. And then you need to qualify for it, or enter the lottery, I should say. So I'm going to enter my first World Series event to get lottery tickets for coming years. And we're going to trail run litmus test ourselves with a group of friends of myself who's going to run the Grand Canyon Rim the Rim Trail.
Wow.
Which is like my main fundraiser for the year.
That's awesome.
There's a variation of the route, but ours will be 43 miles and 12,000 feet of elevation change. We're shooting for like a 12-hour total turn. So yeah, I'm dipping my toes in the ultra trail world. And then the next year, I've already working on 26, of course.
I love you say dipping your toes in when you just described what you're doing. Like, what? No,
yeah,
that's
like
not what I would call dipping your toes.
I would love to be able to, like, there's a subset of the UTMB series, which there's OCC, which is the 3 city names you run through. That's Switzerland to France. CCC, you go Italy, Switzerland, France. And then UTMB is the whole one. Would love to qualify for that. I'm going to use the World Series to work my way up into the 50Ks and hopefully 100K. And then get myself in a position where I can do that. But along the way, as we're training for a full Ironman in 2026, I'm going to try to summit a mountain in a different way. So I thought this is literally how this played out, was my friend I climbed Grand Teton with, after I summited Kilimanjaro, saw the video, he sent me back a message and had a link to this guy cycling up Mauna Kea, which is the volcano of the Big Island. It's actually the biggest mountain in the world, but it's just from ocean floor up.
Sure.
And he said, well, are you just going to try this next? And my response was yes. And then after I said yes, I was like, well, that was a really stupid response. Considering I haven't slept in a day and I'm beat up and just climbed Kilimanjaro. I'm like, but my response was yes. And then I was like, well, that was a really dumb answer. And then emailed my coach and said, do you think you can help me do this? Because I just committed to doing this.
Yeah.
So that is
another amazing quality that you have, is you listen to your intuition, take inspired action. I'll figure it out later. I'm just committing. I want to do this. I feel it. Yes. I'll figure it out later. Because again, if you give ego a chance to swoop in, it's going to talk you out of it.
It's my favorite thing in the world. Is like, I love just buying a plane ticket and then going, okay, let's plan out all the stops in between, right? Like, or just committed to something and going, I don't know how to do this, but we're going to memento this thing backwards, figure out where all the puzzle pieces need to go. And we have a timeline, right? Like, deadlines create action.
And look, I
love that part of it.
Right. And look what you've been able to do with that model in place versus I need to have it all figured out before I commit. No, you don't. And that's a powerful message for so many aspects of our life.
Yeah. So with that, I wanted to do something like a slight variable of what I was doing, because mountain climbing I know isn't for everybody.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure if it's for me yet, but mountain climbing is not for everybody. Not everybody connects with it, but movement and just physically going towards something, whatever that goal might be, probably connects better with people. So a subsidiary of what I'm trying to do, like I have Mental Mountains Project, and then I also started this year Miles for Mental Health. So any races that I do will kind of be run under that alternative moniker, so to speak. Same funnel, same charity, funds go to the same place. Would love to be able to say next year, hey, we have a third and a fourth and a fifth person and now have therapy for as long as they want. And then my personal goal is I have a little bit of an ankle injury at the moment that we're working to. It's not holding me back for what we want to do, but a little bit of a slow start to the year. My initial goal was I wanted to see if I could get I'll explain it better. Every mile that I put under my belt for training, I wanted to donate $1 of my own money towards a charity. All the things that I do are self-funded. None of the money that's raised goes towards to fund any of these adventures and flights and any of that. That's all personally what I take on. All dollars donated go towards a charity. And I'm like, I want to put some of my own skin in the game too. Yeah. So I said, every mile I put under my belt in training, I'm going to donate $1 of myself. My initial goal was 5,000 miles. I wanted to see if I can get it in a year. We've got a little bit of a slow start to the year, so I'm recalibrating what my actual goal can be. We'll stay tuned on that. I'll have some more info, and you can follow me along on Strava. Absolutely. I'm getting better at social media. I really am. But
you better, because we're going to give you some shout outs on here.
So you can follow me on for Strava, so you can be like, hey, dude, you said this is the dollar amount, right? But yeah, I'm excited for both those things. Like, yes, I have big ambitions. I would love to do my own race at some point. I would love to be able to do more public speaking. I would love to connect with people further. Again, not a psychologist, not a psychiatrist. I can't be that person. And I'm still trying to like pat myself on the back of what you're doing is pretty inspiring. It's hard for me to hey, walk tall, puff out my chest and look at the shit I did. This is not me as a human being. There's always going to be other people doing bigger and harder and more intense things. So it's something that I'm getting better with, but I want to, be able to make myself tangible for somebody right now that's listening to this going like, I could never do that. I'm like, I know it's so easy to be like, no, yes, you can. If I can, anybody could. Yeah. I am the living embodiment of, I couldn't get off the couch, man. I was convinced that my life was going to be sitting behind a bar stool and that was like best case scenario. So I'm living proof that if I can extract this out of myself, that anybody can.
Right. I love it so much. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I will get all the links, how people can donate and continue to follow you along too, because I'm excited to see all these adventures come to fruition and how you do. So
thank you, Tammy.
Yes. Thank you so much. I will post again, all the links, all the resources, follow him on social media. So it encourages him to keep us updated through there.
Maybe we'll start a second account, Lil Kev, something like that.
Not little Kev. Little Keith, little LK. That's going to haunt me forever, isn't it? It's going to be your new, like, sign an email, like, sincerely, little Kev, like, no. Anyway.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. All right, everyone. So if this story inspired you in any way, resonated, you want to help out, even just liking, commenting, sharing it with others to get his message out there so people can hear him be like, yeah, I want this guy to come speak at our school, or I want him to come speak at work, or whatever, because, man, your story could light anyone up. So please share this so his message gets out there, and donate away so we can help some more kids, people get this working. So, all right, thank you for listening, and we will see you all next week.
Thank you, Tammy.
That was so fun.